Back to school is busy enough. The last thing you need is shopping that makes it harder. Whether you're moving into a dorm, your first apartment, or just getting organized for the semester, Wayfair makes it easy to get everything you need in one place. Furniture, bedding, storage, decor, study essentials, all at prices you'll love, with fast shipping before move-in day. Get everything you need for back-to-school season. Shop Wayfair.com today.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Hello, I'm Cass Dowding, and this is The Sentimental Gardener, a podcast where I explore the memories and personal stories behind the plants people love and the gardens they create. My guest today is Timothy Mitchell, a landscape architect and plantsman with over a decade of experience shaping both intimate gardens and large-scale public landscapes. Before founding his own practice, Tim spent 8 years at Oculus, working across significant civic projects, and his work has been recognised through a number of national awards. There's a real sensitivity in his approach to working with what a site already holds, designing gardens that evolve over time, respond to climate, and invite people to truly live within them. In this conversation, we'll explore his early memories of being in gardens, the path that led him into landscape architecture, and what he's learnt through working closely with plants over time. We'll also dive into the transformation of a tennis court within Anne-Marie and Paul Winter's garden and what it reveals about reuse, collaboration, and designing spaces that are both deeply considered and resilient. So a big warm welcome today to my guest on the Sentimental Gardener podcast, Timothy Mitchell. Tim, welcome to the Sentimental Gardener podcast.
Thanks, Cass. It's lovely to be here. Lovely to have you here in our garden. We've got Mount William behind us, or Wil-im-ee Moor-ring as it was known to Aboriginal people. So we'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation who are the traditional custodians of this land and have a continuing connection with this place. It's a beautiful spot up there. Occasionally, it's Wurundjeri owned country, but occasionally they do tours of the Stone Axe Quarry up on top of the mountain, awesome. Which is a really, really incredible story. So if you ever get a chance to do it, I'd highly recommend it.
Awesome. That's so great. Thank you for sharing that. Well, you've told me that you've listened to the podcast before, so you're familiar of where we start.
I think so.
So I'm going to start at that very spot again with yourself. And would you be able to share with us, what are some of your earliest memories of being in a garden or a green space?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's a common thread through most of the guests you've had on this show that actually their first memories of being in a green space are actually their first memories. And that's definitely true of me. I think one of my very first memories was we called her Great Nan. She was my great-grandma. But I was the oldest of my family and cousins, so I named her Great Nan. And that was the name stuck. And she had a little place in Murrumbina. And I can remember digging through that sandy soil and pulling out carrots down the back of her shed when I was just a little fella. And yeah, she was passionate about growing veggies. It was a small backyard and fairly simple, but she loved growing onions and beans and carrots. And my great-grandfather I didn't ever meet, but he was passionate about growing beans as well. And Mum was telling me some stories over the weekend about how proud he would be presenting his beans on Christmas Day that he'd grown every year.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah. And another really strong memory that every time I smell it takes me right back there was my grandma and pa's place in Riola where my dad grew up. Had a large fig tree just at the back door, and the smell of figs just takes me back there every time I'm walking down through the city street and smell a fig tree. It just transports me right back there.
Do you know, thinking about that, I don't think I've ever smelt a fig tree.
Yeah, right.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. Oh, it's such a unique smell. I mean, it's the smell of the fruit, really, but they kind of have that smell all year, even when there's not fruit there. And even when I lived in Sydney a few years ago, a lot of the Port Jackson figs that line the streets around Redfern have that same smell. Not as strong as like the edible figs, but it's definitely a really unique smell. And yeah, we had a fig tree here, but it was killed by frost early on after moving here. I feel like there might be a spot where I can find that one will survive. But yeah, I love figs. And what else? I mean, lots of my formative memories are, I guess, out with plants and green spaces. Growing up in Shep, you know, the idea of having a beautiful garden and a garden is something that kind of, you know, all the things that I get out of our garden these days, growing flowers and thinking about beauty, was not something that was kind of I was aware of at all growing up. I mean, the backyard was kind of somewhere to play cricket, and the paddocks and orchards around us was where the food was grown, and the bush was kind of our playground, and I just loved getting out down by the river and going camping and exploring down the bush. So that was, I guess, my main interaction with nature was the bushland down along the Goulburn River, and then we'd go camping up on the Murray as well, which was not too far from Shepparton.
Oh, so good.
Yeah.
Was the bush close to home, or was it just because you went out?
I mean,
and about as
we
kids?
were in town, but it was just, you know, as soon as I was old enough to head off on my own on a BMX, I was down the bush riding around, building bike jumps and just exploring. It was about probably 500 metres away from our house, just down the road, and then had a lot of friends who were on farms, so we'd build cubby houses and, get up to no good.
So good. So you're saying that it wasn't like a conscious thing where people at home were talking about the garden or beauty or plant?
Not really.
You were immersed in it?
Yeah. So my dad was an agricultural scientist, so he sort of had that kind of scientific approach to plants, and it was all about growing food. So he worked on doing research trials on orchards and broadacre cropping and that kind of thing around Shepparton and all over Victoria, actually. So when I was a teenager, I worked with him, you know, measuring peaches and doing bricks tests on tomatoes and all that kind of stuff. Like we'd harvest grain and then weigh all the bags of grain. So it was my job to, you know, sit there in the lab just weighing bag after bag.
Oh, wow.
So, I guess it was something that I, just kind of did for a bit of pocket money. But over time and working as a landscape architect, I feel like I'm drawn to that sort of scientific rigour, thinking about, you know, what plants work and soil media and the chemical balance of soils and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Well, you've mentioned that you are a landscape architect. What was the journey from weighing those bags and measuring the bricks in tomatoes to working as a landscape architect or studying, I suppose?
Well, I didn't even know what a landscape architect was when I finished school in Shep. I mean, I was always loved drawing and was always very creative, but I didn't really, you know, see that as a career at that point in time. When I moved to Melbourne, I studied arts and surveying, a double degree. I think I was one of the only people doing that double degree at Melbourne Uni.
Really?
Surveying and arts. So I was doing film studies and I did an archaeology subject.
Really?
And a bunch of different things. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I really liked surveying, but because I think the reason I wanted to do surveying was because I wanted a job where I could be outside. And I did my work experience actually with a surveying company in Shepparton, and it was just the best week. We were kind of like out in the bush, tropsing through surveying paddocks for fencing, for farming and things like that. I don't even know what the point of what we were doing was, to be honest. But you know, walking out along the channels, because all of Shepparton's irrigation country, so the channels are everywhere. So we're surveying some channels, and I just had heaps of fun. And then when I got to uni, surveying was all about technology and computers, and it's all very kind of technical, and I just didn't really fit in. And actually had a couple of friends that I went to college with, John Harper and Ed Billings, who were studying landscape architecture, and they were pretty cool dudes. So I thought that seemed like a good thing to do that kind of combined my interests, the outdoors, plants and drawing.
Wow.
Yeah. And then when I graduated, sort of friend of a friend was a gardener in England. And so I managed to line up a job as a gardener in England and moved to England and lived over there for a year working as a gardener, which was an incredible experience and totally changed sort of my idea of what a landscape architect could be. I still didn't really, I think it took me a while to kind of figure out what a landscape architect does, because it is such a broad industry, and there's so many, you know, people work in policy and local government, people design, you know, public space, working for government and developers and that kind of thing, and then there's garden designers. I think when I was at uni, in particular, sort of the landscape industry looked a bit down on gardeners and garden designers, but yeah, I think that's rubbish, and I think gardening and gardens are really where it's at, and that's where you can have the most meaningful connection with plants and really get to understand how plants grow and grow together in a community. And I think through uni, I didn't really get that. But when I was working in England as a gardener, seeing gardens repetitively over, going to the same gardens week after week and throughout the seasons and began to realise how, a garden evolves with time and changes over the seasons and not just a static thing. And that just really sparked an interest and a love with plants. So then when I moved back to Melbourne, I decided I needed to know more about plants and then went and did a Masters of Horticulture at Burnley.
It's interesting when you say some people at uni look down on the gardens and garden design, because when I first started doing this, documenting people's journeys and stories, I've come in as, a home gardener, not from an industry or through any training. And I went to the landscape conference where I met you for the first time. And I remember someone said to me, and I talked about this on Jocelyn Bennett's podcast, about how someone said, "Oh, are you a landscape person or are you a garden or a plant person?" And I was like, isn't everyone here here for the same thing? And they said, no, it can be very different. Some people are more about the hardscaping and some people more about the planting design. How would you best describe for people what a landscape architect is?
Yeah, it's a broad question. I think part of the sort of the frustration and the root of that culture in landscape architecture is kind of you tell somebody that you're a landscape architect or you're studying landscape architect and they're like, "Oh, great, we'll get you around to do our garden." And I think that there's just a bit of a misunderstanding of what landscape architects do, which is part of the reason for that frustration. But I think, it really depends. So a lot of landscape architects do really great work on the sort of policy side of things, working with councils and governments and other advocacy bodies, helping to sort of frame what green space what might look like, or develop things like canopy cover targets for cities, really big picture thinking things. And then a lot of commercial practices like Oculus, where I worked at, really goal of the projects that we worked on at Oculus was creating public spaces, or at least creating some kind of public benefit. So it was really like the public spaces were the prize spaces, and they weren't always, a state-owned or government-delivered park. Often it would be what was known as privately owned public space like Wesley Place. One of the great projects I worked on at Oculus was delivered by a developer on land that was owned by the church but had a lease, so it's essentially private land, but it's open to the public, open 24 hours a day, and it serves the same purpose as a public park, but it has some key differences. I suppose some of those are a little bit sort of on the security side of things, so they can kind of control, if people that they want there, they have more power probably to move them on than the police might in a public park. So there's sort of the dark side of it, I guess, but then also they have a lot more money for programming and events and that kind of thing. So Wesley Place has a lot of great events throughout the year, like they did Melbourne Fashion Week there, and they have big screens up when the tennis is on for people to go and watch the tennis on the lawn. So yeah, it's interesting. Before Oculus, I worked at Spire, and we did similar kind of work to Oculus, but it was more sort of out of urban. Oculus was very urban, very much sort of focused on the city, Melbourne, Sydney and Canberra, but kind of the inner urban spaces in the CBD. Whereas Spire, who I worked for before Oculus, did a lot of new parkland for, the sort of urban development around the edges of the city and things like that. A lot of playgrounds, so all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
So broad, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah.
Because depending on what your interest is in, you can go into whatever that is. Yeah.
Yeah. Part of what I've really enjoyed since starting my own business, and my business focuses more on residential garden design. I still do some commercial projects, but the projects that I get really excited about are designing gardens that are full of plants, and you can do a lot more in a private space than you can in a public space because of the levels of maintenance and all that kind of thing. But it's just the length of the project. So in a residential garden design, you can design a garden and have it built, within 6 months sometimes. But a lot of those bigger public projects take years and years, public hospitals. Oculus worked on Bendigo Hospital and currently working on the Melton Hospital. And those projects just take a really long time. A lot of the public spaces like Wesley Place, I think that project went for about 15 years from sort of the conception to completion. And it was sort of delivered in stages, but and there's only a small amount of that is actually planting and planting design. So you might be working on a project for 5 years and it's just a couple of a couple of weeks in the office of actually focusing on the plants. And then it takes a long time to get built, so you don't really get that feedback of what works and what doesn't for a very long time. But working on gardens and residential gardens, you get that feedback, really quickly, and then develop relationships with the owners and the gardeners who look after those spaces. Like Annie's a great example. We text each other almost every week about things that are working in the garden, things that aren't, and I've just learnt so much by being able to see that happen at a faster pace.
Was there a moment where you were working for other people and you knew that it was time to go work for yourself? What was the decision maker there for you?
It was probably having kids, really. I loved working at Oculus. It was a really great team of people, and we worked on a lot of exciting projects. But I'd also loved gardens, and I'd been designing a few gardens on the side, and we built our garden here. And that was something, it was almost like a hobby. It was something that I loved doing, but I didn't really see as a vocation. And then, Lucy and I just had a discussion one night because I was we had Monty, who was probably one at the time. I think it was before Casper was born, or maybe Lucy was pregnant with Casper. Yeah, it was just like I was working late at night on my own private designs and then going to work in the city during the day, and it was just all too much. And she basically said, you either need to stop doing garden designs or just quit your job and do it full time. And I was like, wow, I guess I could do that. And so I did, and I haven't looked back. It was such a great move. I've just really dived headfirst into it, and I feel like I've learnt so much in just been just over a year since I've been doing it. It's kind of crazy because I finished landscape architecture in 2007. So I've been working as a landscape architect for a pretty long time, but I feel like I've learnt more in the last year than I did sort of in the many years leading up to that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what do you think that is due to?
So when I say learnt more, probably specifically learnt more about plants. And that's just been because I've been able to experiment in our own garden. I'm working on a lot of gardens across different contexts and different climates, mostly in Victoria, but some sort of up in the mountains, some areas get really bad frost, some coastal projects, some CBD projects that have things like the urban heat island effect, and every project's different. And you can kind of trial things, and usually I'll put in enough plants that I know will work, so it's not going to be a failure, but then I always like to experiment and try something different on nearly every project as well. So it's been great to, have some successes and some failures. But the amazing thing about gardening and landscapes is they're living systems. So just because something fails doesn't mean that you necessarily did something wrong. It might have been just the weather or something. And sometimes things work when they probably shouldn't have. And so, I don't know. It's pretty, it's hard to say, but yeah.
How would you describe your style? Do you have like a niche for your work, or you accept any project? You got to have that relationship with the client is the most important thing. Certainly over any style. I'm not fixed to any particular style, and the gardens that I do are often very different in style. But I think probably my values really guide what I do, and that's probably and sometimes that might not even be so apparent. And sometimes I'm like really aligned with the client from the beginning, and it's like, yep, this is what we're going to do. And other times we might not necessarily align, but I just try to sneak things in. So in terms of I think gardens should be places for humans, obviously first, but also other animals and wildlife, and have that level of resilience, particularly in the face of a changing climate. And I kind of see the solution to that being biodiversity. So having lots and lots of different species of plants, lots of different types of plants that create different structure, and a diversity of habitat for different insects and birds. And then I'm also really conscious of water use, particularly, actually all over Victoria. So I was sort of people are less aware of it in the city perhaps than in the country, because it's just so in your face out in the country. You're often exposed to more wind and things like that dry the garden out. And then also just the respect of place and site is something that really drives me. So my process as a designer is really starting with an understanding of the site on every project, doing a bit of research on the ecology that would have been here before colonisation, so understanding what types of plants would have grown in this place before it was developed, understanding what the geology is beneath the ground. In a lot of rural contexts, it's as simple as digging a hole, but in the city often there's been so much soil brought in that the soil that you see on the surface is not necessarily indicative of what's underneath. Right.
So doing a mix of kind of actual physical investigation and a bit of desktop research to find that stuff out. there's like lots of layers.
It's great. People love it.
To that question, so it's sort of hard to.
What
give
I'm
a
really
succinct answer.
curious of is when people talk about place and responding to place. So yeah, you've covered it, I suppose, with what's come before.
Mm-hmm.
Do you also what about immediately what's around it? Because I remember seeing this
Yeah.
beautiful post that you did once, and you were commenting on 2 plants, and they were in the bush that's somewhere close by.
Oh yeah, yeah. Really, because we are kind of in the foothills of the Macedon Ranges. So there's sort of Mount Macedon further to our south, and then Mount William in the background here, and then the Cobor Range that kind of extends around towards Kyneton. So there's a lot of really different ecologies within a short distance. And so we go on a lot of bushwalks kind of up into the Cobors, and then there's a really lovely, it's just like a road that's a Goldie Conservation Reserve just down the road where we often go for walks. And this spring was an amazing time, actually. There was, we got a lot of rain, and then there was just an amazing abundance of wildflowers, a lot of, and that's what it would have been. It would have been the arthropodium.
That's it.
Yep, that was in bloom. And so the roadsides were just purple. The chocolate lily, and I got out of the car and was just overwhelmed by the smell of chocolate. I'd never really made that connection before, that chocolate lily smelled like chocolate. But when I went for a walk there, sort of towards the end of last year, it was just incredible. And then there was the purples of the arthropodium, the chocolate lily, and then the yellows of the bulbine lily that were kind of flowering together. And it was just incredible. Yeah.
And is that great inspiration for other people when they're looking at their place or where they're making a garden, just to take the time to observe what's happening or what's already growing around?
Definitely. But those, those the native Australian grasslands and the wildflowers are probably my favourite sort of ecology and favourite type of plant, but it's very ephemeral. So it's sort of the bloom happens, then it's over quite quickly. And then over summer, it's a very sort of dry, sparse landscape. I mean, there's a lot of beauty in it, but it's very sort of small, so you've got to kind of get down close to it to see it. And it's really hard to recreate those systems particularly in a smaller residential context. I mean, I've tried, but I haven't had as much success doing that. So I'm sort of not overly dogmatic about native species, and I like to experiment with other exotics. I mean, in our garden here, most of the plants you can sort of see in the immediate backyard around the house are exotics, although we have tried to intertwine a lot of natives, and the further you sort of go away, the more native the landscape becomes. But it has been a bit of a challenge getting those things to grow together.
Let's talk about this place. And can you take me back to the start when you bought it? What was here?
Well, basically a paddock. So, you kind of stepped out of the house. There was a little fenced off area with the lady before us grew some veggies. So there was things like some silver beet and some spring onions growing sort of along the fence line around the edges of the sort of the little back paddock garden. And then beyond that was just all paddock. I think the fence was probably about where we're sitting here. Okay. But it was really wet. It was a wet year when we moved in. And so basically we'd step down out of the back door into mud.
Oh, no.
So one of the first things we did was there were all these garden beds up the front, a lot of love heart shaped garden beds that had been laid out in these old concrete pavers. So we went and pulled them up and just laid a little pad of paving by the back door so we could kind of get out of the house without getting muddy feet. That was the first thing we did. And then we moved in at the end of March. So it was pretty much exactly 5 years ago that we moved here. And then we just spent winter basically thinking about the garden. And so the ash trees that are above us dropped all their leaves, and we got out the rake and started shaping the garden beds with the fallen ash leaves over the grass was here because it was paddock grass. They had horses here before us. And so, we sort of just raked them around. And I mean, the view to Mount William, Wil-im-ee Moor-ring was incredible. So that kind of, it was obvious that had to be the focal point. And we just played around with shapes for a few months, sort of slowly editing it over time and starting to think about the types of plants that might grow here. Frost was a shock.
Right.
And it's still a shock, the frost we get here. It's actually amazing. There are plants that grow in town, which is probably 20 or 30 metres higher in elevation that won't grow here, which, we're basically in a bit of a frost hollow.
Okay.
The cold air sinks down off the mountains around us. We're pretty much surrounded by mountains on all sides.
Yeah.
And we're kind of near the lowest point. The land sort of falls away, as you can see behind us, to Deep Creek. And then Deep Creek flows down and eventually becomes the Maribyrnong around Sunbury.
Oh, right.
So that's sort of the lowest point in town, but we're kind of right down in the bottom of the valley, and the cold air just comes down. It's amazing to watch the temperature drop when the sun comes up. So it'll be, might be -2 on a cold morning, and then the sun will come up and the temperature just plummets. We've recorded almost, I think it was -8.6 here.
Wow.
And in town will probably be maybe a degree warmer, and then the sun kind of warms up and the cold air disappears. But you get a few mornings like that, and a lot of plants just can't survive. Things like a lot of wattles, because I love wattles. We had big plans for this kind of garden of like ever flowering wattles in the garden, taking wattles from around different parts of the country that flower throughout the year. So we could almost have a wattle in flower. The idea was that we'd have a wattle in flower throughout the year, but a majority of acacia species that we've grown here just have died. There's only a few that survive. Even things like gold dust wattle that we collected seed from in the Cobors and grew from seed and planted out didn't survive. So it's been a shock. Yeah, so I guess that was another big part of building our garden here, was growing everything from seed. So
oh, wow.
Yeah, pretty much. We got we got a few plants that we had transplanted from our little garden in Thornbury, and although we divided them, I think the Deschampsia that's just over here, we had about 3 of those in our garden. Is that a wedge-tailed eagle? Anyway. There it goes. It's being chased by the crows.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
Wow.
Oh, beautiful. Is
Sorry.
he or she a regular?
Yeah, they often fly around, often in pairs. We saw 5 come here one day together, which was amazing.
A family, hopefully.
Yeah, but there's no, that's something else. But yeah, no, the birds are amazing. Sorry, I get distracted.
That's okay.
What were we saying?
You've brought plants, you've grown everything from seed, which is interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, we built this garden without a huge budget. The grass was already here. We didn't really do anything to change that. It was a paddock before, so we've kind of just mowed it and put down some cow manure and aerated it, and it's turned into a nice lawn. But it's certainly like, people often ask what species it is, and it's about 10 different species, and a lot of clover and other things. Like we don't spray anything in this garden, so the garden is a mix of just whatever grows here. But we wanted the garden beds to be big and have a lot of depth and a lot of layers, and we could have never afforded to buy that many plants. Yeah. So it was sort of out of necessity, but it was just life-changing, really, growing everything from seed, because we bought some seed, we collected some seed, we were given some seed by friends and that kind of thing. And then just getting to know plants from their seedling phase was just so valuable, because now I can see things in the garden and just instantly know like what that little centimetre high plant is going to become. So it's just like taught me so much, and the ability to edit things and play around with it. And I mean, ultimately we would love to set up a bit of a nursery here where we actually grow plants, probably just for my design clients. So still being like, the business would still be design, but then being able to have plants to sell to the design clients would be the goal, because we just got so much enjoyment out of it. Yeah. Do
you let a lot self-seed as well?
Yeah, and so that was a big part of the sort of the design of the garden. So and that was the biggest cost, was we brought in some scoria sand, which is a graded sand material. So at the time when we built the garden, I was working with Claire Farrell at Melbourne Uni on a woody meadow project. Yeah.
But did you work with that when that was all happening on the Woody Meadow project?
Yeah, we did a few.
Wow.
First of all, the first time I worked with Claire was on a bid for the Footscray Hospital, which we weren't successful on. But the whole idea of the planting was it was all going to be these different types of woody meadow, some sort of a little bit more, I guess, contrived than others in the courtyard spaces where there wasn't the ability to have that kind of really wild layered effect, and then others that were kind of bigger, that were more like the traditional woody meadow that you see down at Birrangmar and other places. So really got into that and kind of the science behind the woody meadow. And one of the sort of key mechanisms for establishing woody meadow was using scoria as a mineral mulch.
Right.
So a deep mineral mulch that blocked out weeds, provided the right amount of drainage and water retention for the plants to get established, and then just worked as a really effective mulch to essentially keep moisture in the soil. Over time, I guess the ability to suppress weeds disappears because seeds come in from above. But the hardest thing about establishing a garden really is weed competition. And so by placing deep mineral mulch over the existing soil, you can just plant straight into it and the roots will eventually grow down into the soil. So that's what we did here. After we'd raked out the garden beds, we brought in 200 mils depth of scoria sand. And I had a few conversations with Claire about our garden, got a bit of free advice when we were developing this, because I really wanted plants to seed freely in the garden. I really loved the idea of plants being able to set seed and kind of just pop up wherever they wanted and having that kind of really fluid layout to the garden. So we had a plan and we laid it out initially, but now it really has a bit of a life of its own. This time of the year, I mean, it's green because we've had some rain, but it is pretty tangled and messy. We've got two young kids. We've done very little in terms of looking after the garden this year. But yeah, that was part of the intent, was we wanted things to self-seed. So we, rather than using the standard 7 mil aggregate scoria that they use for the woody meadows, we used scoria sand, which is like a graded, I think it's like 0.3 to 0.7 millimetres. It's like very specific, that we got Quarry and Anarchy. They came over in a couple of trucks and then we just laid it out, scraped it up, dug in the edges. Digging in the edges was a big job with a shovel.
Oh, by hand?
Yeah. Because the clay was really heavy as well. Yep. So that was a huge day. And then we planted it out and it's changed it changes every day, but the makeup of the species in the garden has changed a lot since we first planted it. I'm thinking that I'd really like to make a few edits this winter if I get a chance.
Yep.
Things like the euphorbia coralloides over there, it's beautiful, but there's just too much of it, and I worry about our kids getting the sap in their eye when they're running in and out
it's
around.
Quite toxic, isn't it?
Yeah. My dad actually ended up in hospital recently,
really?
pruning some euphorbia. Well, it was euphorbia wolfenii, but got some in his eye and had to go to emergency. Yeah.
Oh no! I think one of my other guests, I think it was Jane Edmondson, was talking about how her mum ended up, but it was a wedding she was going to, and on the way she picked or brushed euphorbia and she got...
Yeah.
It's ringing a bell, but that's interesting when you talk about plant selection with kids. Is there anything else that you've had to change in the garden or adjust? Or I can see a trampoline over there. How have you found... this is a living place, and then you introduce new living little people. Anything that surprised, changed, or
there's a lot of poisonous plants in our garden. So when we first were picking plants, we weren't really thinking about that. But it's actually amazing how clever kids are. Monty, as soon as he was sort of able to walk, has known not to go near the euphorbia.
Okay.
We've also got a lot of foxgloves.
Yeah.
And I do... If they ever self-seed kind of along the borders, I'll pull them out in the first 5 to 10 centimetres. But beyond that, I just leave them in there. And he's been amazing. Hopefully Cass will be the same. But we go to the veggie patch and he knows that he can eat anything in there. But in the garden, he's not allowed to. I mean, Cass was at an age where anything that he gets, he'll put straight in his mouth. So we've obviously got to watch that. But I probably wouldn't use the euphorbia again, because that's something that you could accidentally kind of brush past and get some sap in the eye, and it's just a bit of a pain to prune it, and it's just self-seeds wild. Like that garden bed there's probably 50% euphorbia now.
Oh, wow.
And we didn't plant anywhere near that much initially. So, and we're not going to get rid of it, and I'm happy to have some in the garden. I'm not going to try and, it'd be impossible to get rid of it without pulling everything out probably, but just pull it back a bit. But building a tree house has been fun.
So good.
Yeah. So we had a tree that fell down in a storm about a year ago. There were 4, I think one's a desert ash and 3 a claret actually, but they're all pretty similar. But we had one that snapped about halfway up in a big storm a bit over a year ago. And so we were thinking about removing it, but the trunk was just too big to get out. And then Monty wanted to build a tree house, so we've built a tree house on top of the old stump. It's still a work in progress, but it's been a lot of fun.
It's good having projects, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then building it with them from scratch, and then they can claim it and go, I remember when I built this with Dad. Or
Totally. Oh, back to the first garden memories. I don't remember it, but I was talking to my mum during the week because we had our family sauce making on the weekend, and she was saying when I was, 1 or 2 years old, one of my favourite things to do was to go out and pick the cherry tomatoes off the bush that were growing in our backyard in Shepparton.
Yeah.
I can't actually remember that. I was probably too young, but that is Monty's favourite thing as well, just going out and picking the cherry tomatoes. He just loves it, and it's so great. I mean, I spend probably more energy and time thinking about the veggie patch than the garden these days.
Yeah. Just because the kids are involved and
it's just so great eating your own produce.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, I love it.
Does he eat them then and there, or do they make them back inside?
We'll go out to get some to cook a pasta or something, and he's got a little bucket, so we'll take the bucket out there. But then I've got to just kind of pull them away from him so he can actually come inside with some. We had a great raspberry bush this year as well, which was amazing. So Monty ate a lot of raspberries.
Oh, I'd love that. And they taste so different, don't they? Fresh
so
raspberries compared to the supermarket ones.
Yeah.
We've got some autumn fruiting ones at the moment. And I looked out the back window the other day and went, oh, there's red over there. Quick, running out. And I brought them in and gave them to the kids. And they were like, what? Where'd you get these from? And I'm like, well, the backyard. And they're like, awesome. It's nothing like they're really bland, the ones at the supermarket.
Yeah.
And you understand because they've got to travel and they're mass produced. But nothing like homegrown raspberries.
No, they're amazing. And tomatoes too. And the smell.
Yeah.
Like the smell of tomatoes, I just love. And you just don't get that from the supermarket.
Do you grow your tomatoes from seed too?
We do. We've got, but also my brother he works for a seed company.
Okay.
And so he often will bring up trays of tomato seedlings or vegetable seedlings for us.
Amazing.
So we've sort of got a mix. But Dad has a strain of Spanish tomato that was probably illegally brought here that he's been growing for a long time that we've got some of those in our garden too, which is kind of lovely to be able to just to save the seed and grow them again the next year. Yeah.
The other thing I love about your garden is that it's, I think, inspired by a type of painting. Is that correct? Because on Instagram, the account is called Plein. Is that how I pronounce it?
Yeah, that's how I say it.
Yeah, it doesn't have some French
If you were French, you might say it slightly differently, but I just say Plein.
What's that story?
Yeah, so when we built the garden with my wife Lucy, and she was as much involved in sort of the design and the layout and the actual physical labour of building the garden as I was. And she works in the arts, and she was working on an exhibition called Light at Acme at the time, which was an exhibition of Impressionist painters. And so she came up with the idea of plein air, which I guess kind of brought both of our interests together, her background in art and mine in plants. And the idea of painting, on plein air is outdoor painting. So that's like Van Gogh and Monet and all the Impressionist painters would set up their easel outside and paint the landscape as they saw it in the landscape. Yeah. And so I think we kind of took that approach to gardening as well. As we were setting up, you asked a question about what's the difference between, your professional practice and your home practice. And I think actually just being designing in the landscape is something that you don't really get to do so much professionally. But this garden was designed in the garden. There were a few scribbles and sketches, but I'm still to finish the master plan for our garden 5 years later.
It's always the way, isn't it?
Yeah. So that was the idea of plein air, was just gardening on plein air or outside in the landscape. Plein air literally translates to open air. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That feels like a good segue into design work. And we wanted to touch on a piece of design or a place that listeners would be familiar with if they've listened to our Christmas special, the Sentimental Gardener Christmas special. And my guest was Anne-Marie Winter. So Anne-Marie and her husband Paul have a house down at Arthur's Seat. And Anne-Marie is a brilliant gardener, but they employed you to help them with the design of what's been called the tennis court transformation. Yeah. Because it literally was a tennis court, and you transformed it into a meadow and I can't even describe it right now, but I would love to hear what that was like, when they came to you, what did they tell you that they wanted, and what was that like collaborating with people who already had this established skill and garden, and then obviously you're, started your business, tell me all about it.
Yeah, it was incredible. I was so lucky to be involved in that project and get to work with Annie and Paul. They're, as you said, incredible gardeners, lovely people, and it was just it's been a beautiful relationship to work with them. I think we'd been following each other on Instagram for a while, and then this little, it's looking a bit worse for wear actually, but little timber deck over there, this property before we moved here had horses. So my office is actually the old stables that we converted, and the horse yards were kind of at the back of the garden. So when we were opening up the space to build the garden, we took down all the old post and rail fence that was here, and we used the rails to build a little deck in the garden. And I think Annie had been thinking about what to do with the tennis court, and she really didn't feel right about just kind of pulling out all the old steel fencing and throwing it away. And so she contacted me after she saw a little post that I did about, reusing the timber rails, just to sort of start a conversation. And then she's like, oh, you're actually a designer. And so then went down and met them, saw the tennis court. It was, the tennis, her garden is incredible, but the tennis court was a bit miserable. It was it's pretty overshadowed. The AstroTurf, the fake grass, was all sort of full of algae, and it was really sort of soggy and dark. They didn't play any tennis, and it was so it was just kind of just this wasted space. But we saw great potential in it because it was almost like a clearing in a forest, surrounded by trees. And when they built the tennis court, they used the soil from the excavation for the concrete to create a berm that pretty much ran around the edge of the garden. So we came up with this idea of creating this like a little clearing in a forest, almost like a little grassland clearing in a forest. A lot of her garden on the other side is very kind of bright colours, and this place we felt could be a little bit more subdued and quieter. So we kind of played around with the idea of using predominantly native plants. And like I was saying before, like those grassland species, they're smaller and you've really got to kind of zoom in to appreciate them, but they have this really sort of delicate beauty. A lot of those species we've used there, and so to make them work, we've put a lot of work into the design of the soil and the drainage, and it was quite a technical design, but it was a lot of fun, and it was really reassuring to know that it was going to be looked after by people as nurturing as Paul and Annie, because I wouldn't have had the confidence to do that project with just any client, because we took a lot of risks, and a lot of people were like, that's not going to work.
Really?
Yeah.
That's great.
Because planting into, we literally cut slits in the concrete and planted straight into it. Well, we played around with the soil and brought in some scoria mulch and mixed it with some bark chips to kind of create essentially like a rooftop garden media.
Yeah. You didn't it's not like really nutrient dense, is it? It's actually quite, the plants have really got to work hard to thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was part of it, because we wanted to keep the plants small so you can it still felt very open, like at least on the tennis court. We've got a lot of taller plants around the edges. But we wanted to kind of have that, the plants, low nutrients. Because of the concrete, it gets really hot, so they've got to be able to deal with like the extreme of heat over summer. And because it's kind of in that berm, it doesn't get a huge amount of air movement. Right. Although anyone who was there for the Global Gardens of Peace might disagree. That was a really windy day. So it gets really hot. And then in winter, it gets really wet because it's clay. We're basically beneath the concrete is compacted clay. All of the topsoil was taken away and the soil was compacted, road base put down, compacted, and then concrete on top. So very hostile conditions for growing plants. But we used a lot of species that would actually improve the soil. So over time, that garden's going to change. Things like sunflowers that have really deep tap roots that will break down into the soil and hopefully improve the drainage over time and break the soil up. But it's been amazing. It's been a joy to watch, and Annie's often sending me updates, and it's just so beautiful. She takes great photos as well.
Yes, she does.
Yeah, but it's been... not many failures at all, which has been amazing. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. We sort of had to change the design as we went because there was a really, really big rainfall event halfway through. And Annie sent me a photo, and it was like this beautiful architectural water feature, these kind of like long linear strips of concrete with water just sitting in between them. Because after the concrete was all cut, but before the garden went in, I think they got about 50 mils of rain overnight, and it created this like amazing concrete lake. And then we were like, oh, maybe we need some more drainage. So then we ended up like putting in a swale, and we came up with this idea of these soaks. So we drilled these holes down just at sort of the isolated low points in the, because we created paths through the concrete meadow, as we called it.
Yep.
Had these points where the water couldn't get away. So we just drilled down. I don't know how far Annie went in the end. She dug them. It was a lot of hard work. Just these pits that we then filled with drainage gravel, so that the water would have somewhere to go. And like in a small rainfall event, it just kind of goes into the pit and it might sit there. If it's a bigger rainfall event, then the water might backfill into the garden beds. But then we also, had the planting that the plants in those spots would be able to tolerate wet feet, and then the plants further away. So there was it was all very intricately mapped out. And then Annie's constantly been topping it up and putting other things in there, and it's been a great project.
Yeah. That's so great also for you, learning and having that relationship with the client, isn't it? That you can see, especially because it sounds like that you really love gardens that change over time.
Yeah.
And you're not into creating a one-off, and then it's all about maintaining the standard and the look, and that it can adjust and change. And it'd be really interesting to see how those plants do thrive with those water spots. And if they, like you said, you'd love to grow plants here, but then it's too frosty, and so that'll have to adapt and change. And so that keeps it interesting too as a gardener, doesn't it?
Oh, so much so.
Like you've got to go out there and you've got to look and see how things are responding.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah. Like as I said, our garden's changed a lot since we planted it. Initially, we put in a lot of annuals because, I kind of just like wanted it. Like we put in a lot of work, and I felt like we needed a bit of instant reward. So we put in lots of cosmos and what else? I can't even remember. Lots of different annual species. So we had heaps of flowers in the first year. And a lot of those Queen Anne's lace was another one, which is a bit of a weed, but they've actually pretty much disappeared because the perennial species have sort of taken over. Didn't see any cosmos this year. There was a couple of small Queen Anne's lace kind of over there where there was a bit of a gap, but the garden's just so dense. There's not really much room for any annual flowers or even weeds, which is good. So there's not a lot of weeds in our garden.
Awesome.
I mean, there are if you look closely, but
I won't look closely.
we don't really. Yeah, I would probably do like maybe hit the garden 4 times a year to get in and like spend an afternoon weeding or cutting back, and that's about it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Now, I want to jump into your sentimental plants. On the podcast, we ask our guests 3 sentimental plants that have some type of memory or meaning attached to them. So, Tim, could you please share your first one with us?
Well, yeah, I think maybe fig trees, just because of that first memory and the smell of them, and the way that smell can just transport you places. It's the way smell and memory works really quite amazing. And I mean, Lucy doesn't like figs, so she's probably not like eager to grow a fig tree here, but I do love eating them. Hopefully we'll get one in one day, but it is a bit of a challenge with the climate here. What else? I find it really hard to pinpoint individual species, because what I really love are gardens that are multi-species and watching plants work together.
Or is there a garden that has special memory or meaning attached to it for you?
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be a plant. It can, yeah. I mean, the bush is a landscape that is really special to me. I think the landscape of like the sort of riverine landscape of the Golden Valley where I grew up kind of feels like home to me. Every time I go back to Shepparton, I always want to get down the bush and go for a walk down there, especially in springtime. So actually a plant that does have a really, sentimental value to me are wattles. And it's because of that moment when you're kind of coming out of winter and it sort of signals that the cold months are over and summer's on its way, spring's starting. And just the smell and the feel of the bush when you're in the bush and it's just lit up by wattles. Around Shepparton, it's like the silver wattle, Acacia dilbata, that just like lights up the bush, and they're amazing. It's just like the smell is overwhelming, and just the colour, like this landscape that was quite
subdued sort of the bluey grey colour of the gum trees, and it's mostly sort of that grassy woodland, so the kind of browny green tinge of the grasses underneath, and quite simple and unassuming. And then all of a sudden at the end of, or sort of in the end of June or through August, the bush just lights up, and it's just amazing. And it's different. It's kind of the same but different everywhere you go, because there's different species of acacia that do the same thing in slightly different times a year. But the bush up here with the prickly Moses kind of does that, and the silver wattlers as well, but they're different here to the way they are in Shepparton. So I think I just love all of the differences. Like I love going for a bushwalk and, going through the transformation of different ecologies, and you go up a hill and you just kind of, the plants around you change and the soil type changes, and it's just like walking and noticing that change is something that, I get a bit of a thrill from.
So good. I love it. Well, are you ready for some quick fire questions?
Yeah, sounds good.
If you had to paint a garden plein air style, but the only equipment you could use instead of a brush was dried seed heads or lush spring growth, which one would you choose?
I think it depends on the seed, obviously, but I think I'd go with the seed heads. Yeah. I mean, I love drawing with charcoal. That's kind of a great medium to mess around with. Not that I really ever use it anymore, but just I think somebody said to me a while ago that like a great way of designing a garden is like to see it in black and white. Oh. And so it's like all about the textural contrast and the structure. I mean, I love colour and I love flowers, and I think about flower colour a lot, but I think that has to come after getting the structure right. So working in black and white, just like shading with a piece of charcoal is a great way to kind of think about, that the way forms kind of knit together. And sometimes I look out at our garden and think we need a little bit more contrast, because it's all very kind of feathery and flowy and soft. And sometimes I think it just needs something with a bit more weight. But other times I kind of just love the way it all moves together. So I don't know. But anyway, charcoal. I mean, seed heads.
Seed heads, aka charcoal. That makes sense though. Yeah, so good. Okay, next one. If there was a reality TV show for landscape architects, what would you make the weekly challenge?
Plant ID.
That's the best answer.
Because I reckon most landscape architects probably wouldn't do very well.
I didn't expect that one, but I can see it. Oh, Tim, that's the best. I think that's the best answer that I've had yet. That is perfect. Okay, next one. You get to design one of these, but you can only pick one. It's either a rooftop garden in Antarctica, a median strip on a freeway, or a garden in total shade forever, 100% of the time. Which one are you backing yourself on?
Oh, well, I feel like I've actually done a few median strips and gardens in shade forever.
Okay.
So maybe I'll go with rooftop garden in Antarctica because it's something new and I'm always up for a challenge. But like on a lot of big development projects, you are designing a garden that's surrounded by tall like towers, residential towers, and they literally get no sun. And then when I was at Spire, we did a lot of greenfield developments, so we designed median strips. It was tough.
There you go. That's so cool. All right, what's one word or sentence to describe how you feel when you're here in this garden?
Awestruck. Both in a good and bad way. Like that kind of, the feeling of sublime is like sort of the pinnacle of what, I try to create in a garden design. It's like that feeling of sort of that overwhelming feeling of awe and wonder. But then also a lot of the time it's like, oh my God, there's like so much to do and got no time. And
So it oscillates from one to the other, but it is
that kind of feeling of awe,
So good. Okay, last question. Who is one person from history or still alive that you'd love to sit down with in a garden and swap garden stories with?
Oh, this is a hard one. I was thinking about this during the week because I've heard you ask this question and I actually didn't come up with an answer.
Okay, well, I'm going to need one today.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I love just walking through people's gardens. So I feel like it would have to be somebody who has a garden.
Mm-hmm. That's a
and
good
then
start.
we could like go for a walk through their garden. I feel like, when I was studying landscape architecture at uni, a lot of the like historical figures that we studied weren't necessarily gardeners or had gardens, but Roberto Burle Marx was one who did incredible paintings and then transformed them into incredible landscapes and was really passionate about plants, which I think that was why at uni I was drawn to him, because I always loved plants and I was not so much, didn't get as excited about paving. So yeah, he'd be one for sure. But then I don't know, like I just love talking to anybody who's got a garden. I'm catching up with Ralph Bristow tomorrow over in Goffs Bay, and I would love to go for a wander through his garden and get his thoughts on it.
Have you been to his garden yet?
I actually went to 2 open gardens there for over the years, but I didn't make it to the one this year. But he's a great gardener.
He's incredible. Have you heard his episode?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's incredible. Yeah, I went to the recent open garden, having been there probably like 6 months beforehand.
Yeah.
And it just is incredible, the change.
Yeah.
And just seeing how everything develops. And I just have so many questions, but I don't even know what to ask.
Yeah.
And I love, this is not an episode about Ralph, but I love that designers want to learn from other designers, but it seems like a lot of people are really happy to share.
Oh, absolutely.
And there's so many different ways you can approach garden design.
Yeah.
And and also I think what you've brought up, like wandering through the garden while talking to them is really important.
It's
not
great.
Just looking at a photo. There's so much more you can get from understanding, especially with Ralph's place, like the views and how he treats perspective and place. Yeah.
It's and the photos he takes are amazing.
Yeah.
But that was one of the real highlights of working on Annie and Paul's garden. Is every time I go down there, we'd usually start, not really like, it wasn't like a planned thing, but we'd get there and then we'd just sort of wander down the garden path and then spend the first hour just like walking through the garden, talking about plants and gardening, and it was the best.
So good. All right, well, thank you so much for being my guest today. And it's been such a joy sitting here in your garden, watching it change as the sun's slowly setting and going down, and just watching all the different plants be highlighted at different times. It's beautiful. It's so gorgeous. So you should be proud. And this beautiful view behind us. Remind me again what the...
Mount William is the name of the mountain, and then Wil-im-ee Moor-ring is the axe quarry that sits up on top of the mountain.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, Timothy Mitchell, thank you so much for being my guest today on the Sentimental Gardener podcast.
That was fun. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Let's go for a walk around the garden.
Let's do it. Recording this episode while sitting in Tim and Lucy's garden on an autumn evening was like sitting inside an impressionist painting. And as the sun set in the distance, it was as if the painter washed the scene in a golden hue. Photos of their garden can only partially capture the beauty because being there in person is such an immersive experience. I find myself wondering when I'm in these incredibly immersive gardens, how do they do it? How do they put everything together so you feel that whoosh feeling when you're there? And after today's chat, I'm wondering if part of it is the intention of designing while you live in and around the space. Being able to take your time and not just creating a bird's eye plan of which plants go where you get to stand in the middle of a garden and work out exactly what plants will be highlighted at 8:30 p.m. in high summer as the sun is setting, almost taking on a lighting designer's idea of backlighting the main characters of a play. The idea of using fallen ash leaves in winter to map out curved garden beds blew me away with how there are so many different ways to work on garden design. And I don't use the word work lightly here. I'm getting the idea through all these conversations that the most alive gardens are always being edited, observed, and mulled over, much like a painter takes a step back, arms crossed in front of them, and surveys the colours and markings on the canvas and compares it to what they see in front of them. How wonderfully freeing it is to know that in our home gardens, we can start without a plan on a piece of paper when that seems too daunting. We don't have to know how it's going to end up. When we plant some things this year, watch what they do over the next 3 seasons and edit it in a year to create something more like what we see in our heads. Or just the joy of simply planting and experiencing the wonder of seeing what pictures appear as the seasons change and shift. To find out more about Tim's work, head on over to his website, timothymitchell.com.au. And to follow pictures of the garden, head on over to Tim and Lucy's Instagram at plein-air_garden. This podcast is made possible because of the paid Substack subscribers. Try saying that fast. If you'd like to become a subscriber and get bonuses like Sentimental Friend episodes and behind-the-scene videos of friends' gardens, head on over to thesentimentalgardener.substack.com. And if you're a fan of the podcast, consider leaving a review on Apple or Spotify because it really helps other people find these stories. A huge thanks to Hayden Schuler from Verea Gardening for our theme music and to Tom Dowding for audio mixing. This podcast was produced and edited by me, Cass Dowding.